The Civil War can compare to World War II in terms of the impact it had on the basic economic structure of American society. The Great Depression is over. As World War II enters, you see here GDP goes to the roof, unemployment drops to almost nothing. Government spending is the key here. Government spending is way up. Remember, FDR tried to end the Great Depression through government spending in the New Deal. He spent $32 billion in the New Deal, which in today's dollars would be about $500 billion. World War II, the government spent $288 billion, or translated into modern dollars, $3.5 trillion. So World War II meant about 7 times as much government spending as the New Deal had been. If you look at that graph on the bottom, you'll see how much we spent on the Civil War as a percent of our GDP, how much we spent on World War I. You see the New Deal barely makes a dent there, and then you see the explosion of government spending with World War II. Another way to think about this is in 1939, during the New Deal, the federal budget had been $9 billion. In 1945, the federal budget was $100 billion. GDP goes from $91 billion in 1939 to $166 billion in 1945. Income doubles in some regions of the United States because of the enormous demand for labor. The war's primary impact is in the American West. The American West will see $40 billion in capital investment. And remember, the New Deal had also primarily seen its projects in the West. And so really, from the Progressive era up through World War II, the West is going to be developed by an enormous amount of government money. It's ironic today because a lot of the anti-government sentiment is focused in the West. But the West really wouldn't be the West without this incredible infusion of government dollars. So why do we put all this money into the West in World War II? Because remember, our primary role is fighting the Japanese in the Pacific Ocean. Of course, the West is on the Pacific coast. And so the West will be where most of our World War II activity takes place. Because of this, the West, particularly California, will become the main industrial center for shipping. This is where we manufacture our aircraft carriers and our battleships and the planes that we use. And the West will become the heart of the airline industry as well, because we need to get out into the Pacific and fight the Japanese. Los Angeles, that's LA Noir up there in the top left corner, but it's a really nice recreation, becomes a major American city at this point, largely because of World War II. Our soldiers are based out of there. A lot of the production for the war is out of there. And this is what turns LA into one of America's premier cities. More dramatically, though, is the transformation of Las Vegas. In the bottom right there, you see what Las Vegas looked like early in the war. But Las Vegas basically became where our planes would land as they flew from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so you ended up with this tiny little town in the desert filled with 18, 19, 20-year-old boys. And, of course, that created a market for entertaining those 18, 19, 20-year-old little boys, which are young men who are on their way, of course, to fight a war and possibly die. And that's how we get this Sin City, this pleasure palace out there in the middle of the Nevada desert. And if you think about it, Las Vegas was designed to be paradise for young men. And, of course, in many ways it still is today. But this isn't a coincidence. This is because this is where the soldiers were often left waiting for a few days before they traveled onto the West Coast and then went off into the Pacific to possibly die. The unemployment of the Great Depression turns into a labor shortage in World War I. More than 16 million men will serve in the military alone. So you imagine you just pull all that out of the workforce, and already unemployment's going to drop dramatically. But it was more severe than that, because the workforce actually increases by 20%. Because people who had previously been thought too young to work or too old to work or too female to work began entering the workforce. When the boys aren't here, employers will turn to people they would traditionally not be interested in employing. And you see a lot of women entering into the workforce. We'll get to the women a lot more in a minute. The government cuts deals with unions. They allow closed shops, meaning you have to join the union to work in a place, in exchange for unions agreeing not to go on strike. And wages actually go up by 15% during the war. But unfortunately, there are more than 15,000 small strikes, not the major unions, but smaller unions, during the war. And when the United Mine Workers go on strike in May of 1943, FDR pushes through the Congress passes the War Labor Disputes Act, which FDR vetoes, but it's overridden. It forces a 30-day wait before you can allow a strike to start and gives the government the opportunity to seize the factory if they claim it's vital to the war. And there actually begins to be a pushback against labor. Labor begins to kind of develop a bad name for itself because when you go on strike for higher wages or better working conditions, while millions of American boys are risking their life, that doesn't look very patriotic. That doesn't look very good. And so the popularity of labor will begin to decline. Many states respond to this by passing what are called right-to-work laws, which is to say, which gives employers the ability to have an open shop, meaning you can't be forced to join a union to work in an industry, which effectively destroys unions. I live in Texas. We're a right-to-work state, and there's really no unions here in Texas to speak of.